The night of March 28, 1941, the Ionian Sea, roughly 70 miles southwest of Cape Matapan on the southern tip of Greece. 3 British battleships, all of them laid down before the First World War even ended, are closing in total darkness on an Italian naval squadron that has no idea they are anywhere nearby. The Italian admiral believes the British battle fleet is 170 miles away, safely out of range, tucked in for the night. In reality, it is 45 miles away and closing fast. The Italian cruisers have no radar. The British ships do, and they are firing cordite that produces almost no visible muzzle flash in the dark. At 22:27, from a range of under 2 miles, 3 British battlewagons open fire simultaneously on an enemy squadron that still has not seen them. Within 4 minutes, 2 heavy cruisers that had taken years and immense national resources to build will effectively cease to exist as fighting ships. This is the story of the Battle of Cape Matapan and how radar turned a night action in the Mediterranean into one of the most one-sided naval engagements of the entire war. By March 1941, the war in the Mediterranean had reached an uneasy stalemate. Britain needed to keep supply convoys running to Greece, where troops were being landed to resist an expected German invasion, and Italy's navy, the Regia Marina, was under pressure from Berlin to disrupt that traffic using its own considerable surface fleet. On paper, the Italian navy that put to sea in late March 1941 was a genuinely serious threat. The brand new battleship Vittorio Veneto, carrying 9 1/5-inch guns and displacing 45,000 tons, escorted by 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and a substantial destroyer screen, under Admiral Angelo Iachino. Against this, Admiral Andrew Cunningham's Mediterranean fleet could offer 3 elderly Queen Elizabeth-class battleships: Warspite, Valiant, and Barham, ships originally designed and built before 1915, alongside the carrier formidable 7 light cruisers and 17 destroyers. A straightforward comparison of tonnage, gun caliber, and ship age gave no obvious reason to expect the older, slower British battle line to win a clean, decisive victory over a modern Italian fleet built specifically to contest the Mediterranean. What the tonnage tables could not show was the sheer scale of the intelligence advantage sitting on Cunningham's side before the battle had even started. Bletchley Park's codebreakers had intercepted and decrypted Italian naval signals, revealing the outline of Iachino's planned operation. Intelligence passed to Cunningham in time for him to prepare a response the Italian command never suspected was coming. Cunningham himself added a small piece of theater of his own. He made a visible show of going ashore in Alexandria that afternoon carrying golf clubs. A deliberate performance for any Axis-friendly observers watching the harbor, before quietly slipping back aboard Warspite after dark to sail with the fleet undetected. The Italians went to sea confident that any British reaction, if it came at all, would arrive too late and know too little to matter. The battle's daylight phase on the 28th belonged mostly to aircraft. Fleet air-armed swordfish biplanes flying from Formidable launched repeated torpedo attacks on the Italian force through the day, scoring a hit on Vittorio Veneto herself that briefly slowed the battleship, and later, in the early evening, a hit on the heavy cruiser Pola that left her dead in the water, unable to move under her own power. Admiral Iachino, still working from the assumption that Cunningham's battle fleet was far out of range, made a decision that would prove catastrophic. Rather than abandon the crippled Pola to save the rest of his force, he detached her sister cruisers Zara and Fiume, along with a flotilla of destroyers, and sent them back through the darkness to rescue her. It was, given what Iachino believed about British positions at the time, a reasonable and even humane order. Given what was actually true, it sent 2 more heavy cruisers directly into the path of an oncoming enemy battle line. If you're finding this account of how radar quietly decided a Mediterranean naval battle interesting, subscribing helps the channel keep telling these stories properly. At around 22:25, radar operators aboard HMS Valiant picked up a contact roughly 4,000 yards away. A large, stationary vessel that turned out to be the crippled Pola, still adrift, and waiting for help that had not yet arrived. Minutes later, the same radar picked up 2 further, larger contacts closing on the first, Zara and Fiume, arriving with their destroyer escort to attempt the rescue, completely unaware that the entire British battle line was now bearing down on the same patch of sea. None of the Italian ships carried radar of their own. In the pitch dark, with no visual warning and nothing on any instrument to suggest danger, they were, in the words of one historian describing the scene, sighted men moving through a world of the blind. Cunningham altered course to bring his battleships onto the radar bearing, ordered his destroyers clear of the line of fire, and closed the range in total silence. At 22:27, at a range that had closed to under 3,800 yards, close enough that naval gunners on ships this size rarely if ever fired at each other directly, HMS Warspite illuminated Fiume with searchlights and opened fire with her 1.5-inch guns, immediately joined by Valiant and Barham. Among the young officers manning a searchlight on Valiant's bridge that night was a royal midshipman named Prince Philip of Greece, decades before he would become Britain's Duke of Edinburgh, tasked with holding a beam steady on the Italian ships the moment radar gave the bearing. 5 separate 1.5-inch shells struck Fiume within the opening salvos, one blast tearing her forward 8-inch gun turret entirely off its mounting and hurling it over the side. Zara was hit just as hard in the same opening minutes. Neither Italian cruiser had any real opportunity to return fire in any organized way. Their main armament had not even been brought to readiness for a night engagement, since nobody aboard either ship believed one was remotely likely. Cunningham later described the entire encounter in blunt terms of his own, calling it something closer to a massacre than an actual battle. In a little over 4 minutes, both Italian heavy cruisers had been reduced to burning wrecks. The destroyers escorting Zara and Fiume, Alfieri, Carducci, and Oriani fared little better once the British battleships turned away and left them mopping up to their own escorting destroyers. In the confused, close-range night fighting that followed, both Alfieri and Carducci were sunk, while the immobilized Pola, the ship the whole rescue mission had been mounted to save in the first place, was boarded and finished off shortly afterward, her surviving crew taken prisoner. Only Oriani and one further destroyer escaped the immediate area to report what had happened. Italian losses for the night amounted to roughly 2,300 sailors killed, alongside the total loss of 2 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers. British losses for the entire 3-day operation amounted to a single fleet air arm aircraft, with not one Royal Navy ship suffering damage of any consequence. The strategic consequences reached well beyond the ships actually sunk that night. The scale and one-sidedness of the defeat convinced the Italian Naval High Command that risking capital ships in a major fleet action against a British force equipped with functioning radar was no longer an acceptable gamble, and the Regia Marina avoided large-scale surface engagements of this kind for most of the remainder of the war, preserving its heavier units rather than risking a repeat of Matapan. For Britain, already stretched thin trying to defend Greece and Crete against a looming German invasion, removing the threat of a major Italian surface sortie freed the Mediterranean fleet to focus almost entirely on the air and land campaigns that followed within weeks. Historians have since noted that Cape Matapan, alongside its tactical result, marked something close to the end of an era in naval warfare itself. It stands as the last major fleet action in Royal Navy history, fought in the older tradition of battleships trading direct broadsides in a set-piece line, before radar, naval aviation, and eventually the aircraft carrier finished displacing the battleship as the deciding weapon at sea. Nothing about Warspite, Valiant, and Barham's specifications explained what happened that night. They were older, slower, and individually less powerful than the newest ship in the opposing fleet, built for a naval war that had ended more than 2 decades earlier. What decided the battle was a set of advantages no gun caliber could measure. Intercepted signals that told Cunningham roughly where to look, a radar set that let his gunners see an enemy that could not see them back, and cordite that let his ships fire without giving away their own position in the process. 2 heavy cruisers, each representing years of shipbuilding and immense national investment, went from fully operational warships to burning wrecks in under 4 minutes, sunk by 3 battleships whose enemy never even knew they were in the fight until the shells were already in the air.